Hello everyone, and welcome to Dutch Greybeard. In this video I will go through all the fantasy authors I have met for the first time as a reader in 2025. In December of 2024 I made a similar video. Since the start of my journey into fantasy in January of 2023, I then had gotten to know 18 writers that were new to me. Just a quick reminder of who they were. Now, at this point, I can add another 15 to that list. Even though 2025 is not over yet, I don't think any new authors will present themselves in the remaining weeks. So, since my rebirth into fantasy as a reader, I have discovered 32 new authors in this amazing genre. Yes, it has been quite the journey so far. Like in that first video, I will again rank the authors from least favorite to favorite. In 2025, I also met 3 new authors who write outside of fantasy, who I will mention briefly, before going on to the fantasy portion. In March of 2025, I read A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Every now and then I like to read children's fiction, and this one was a very nice diversion. At the beginning, in January, I read Proof of Heaven by Eben Alexander. This is a non-fiction book about a near-death experience from the author. A fascinating read, although a little bit dry at times. My best non-fantasy book was To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. This book was gifted from my good friend B.J. Minton, who grew up in Alabama, where this story is set. I did a short video on this book, telling how it is still relevant 65 years after its publication. Then on to the fantasy, in the order of my appreciation. My least favorite new writer was C.J. Cherryh. The fact that she is lowest on the list has to do with the high expectations I had for one of her books. I must have picked up The Dreaming Tree with this beautiful Michael Whelan cover at least 10 times to start reading it. But the opening sentence made me put the book back every time. When I found BJ willing to read this book with me at the end of July, I had no choice but to go through with it. Unfortunately, expectations were not met. I struggled so much with the first 130 pages that after about 1 week, I decided to stop reading it. I hate it when I have to DNF a book, but life is simply too short to waste time on cloggy and hard-to-understand prose telling a story I couldn't make heads or tail of. Obviously, it is unfair to rank an author at the bottom based on only 130 pages when she has written some 100 novels. But, however short, this first experience with C.J. Cherryh was off-putting, to say the least. Let us quickly move on to the next new author that I have very little positive to say about either, I'm afraid. I finished reading The Magic City, a children's book by Edith Nesbit, in the first week of December. Although, to be very honest, I more or less skimmed the final 100 pages of the total of 187. In the first 80 pages I found a couple of nice things, but overall this book, which was first published in 1910, has not aged well. Philip, the main character, can only talk posh English, and with the "I say" every 3 sentences or exclamations like "This is jolly rum." Also, the writer herself occasionally peeps around the corner to address the reader with asides. And the prose at times is simply weird, with lines like, "You be off, Mr. Philip. Without you want to flee in your ear." I have no idea what that means. I did not enjoy myself, even though the concept of the story is quite nice. There were even a few memorable lines, like this one. "Of course it's magic. Everything in the world is magic until you understand it." But overall, I don't believe I will be tempted to pick up any other book by this author anytime soon. Even though Nev from Nev's Bookchannel, who has recommended this author to me, really emphasizes that I should read a book of which I forgot the name already, but I'll put it somewhere down here. I might just do that. Who knows? This next new author is a favorite of many booktubers, so I'm aware of my controversial take on the Dungeon Crawler Carl series by Matt Dinniman. I've listened to the first 3 books in the series. The first one I started halfway in June, and I've just finished listening to number 3. So far, it has been mildly entertaining at best. Because of the praise this writer receives all over BookTube, I thought I couldn't go wrong and bought the first 4 books on audio. This is something I will probably never learn, to restrain myself before buying an entire oeuvre by an author unknown to me. A book, practically any book, holds a promise. What I cannot seem to get through to my head is that in this respect, not all promises are kept. I guess that gamelit, or whatever this subgenre is called, simply isn't for me. I couldn't care less about a character's inventory, his strength, health, or experience points. From the get-go, it is clear that they will survive every death trap they enter, because otherwise the series will end. I will admit that Carl's ways of surviving are inventive at times. Also, I don't have very much sympathy for Princess Donut, or any of the other characters for that matter. The humour does not infect me, and there is hardly a story to speak of, other than surviving the many fights and reaching the next floor before the old one collapses. Nevertheless, I like listening to voice actors Jeff Hayes and Annie Ellicott, and I will also listen to Book 4. But after that, I will say goodbye to Matt Dinniman and probably this subgenre as a whole. So far, the new authors have not yet reached the 3-star range, but Jen Williams is the first. I gave her book The Copper Promise, which is the first in a trilogy, 62 points out of 100. Together with my good friend BJ Minton, I read this book in the final week of November and was very disappointed. I did not like the prose, which to my eyes could have used much heavier editing. With the one exception of Sebastian, all of the characters irritated me in one or other way. Like the relentless princeling Wedrin keeps on calling Aaron Frith just to get on his nerves. Also, the story is a dime a dozen. Predictable, repetitive, and simply not very interesting. Despite all these grievances, I enjoyed reading the book. It is the first book this author published in 2014, so for now I want to give her the benefit of progress. I have the rest of this series, and I also have the Winnowing Flame trilogy on my shelves. At this point, I'm willing to give The Iron Ghost, the second book in the Copper Cat trilogy, a chance, although that won't be happening this year. That book was published in 2015, and I sincerely hope it will show some improvement. If not, I highly doubt I will read anything more by this author. The outcome will sooner or later appear on this channel. This next new author, number 5 so far, again didn't really rock my world. Ilona Andrews is the pen name of Ilona and Andrew Gordon, an American husband and wife writers duo. Being a recommendation from someone whose judgment I value, I instantly bought the first 7 books in their Kate Daniels series. Perhaps urban fantasy isn't my thing, or it is just these stories, of which I've now read 2 in March and April. But while reading Magic Bites and Magic Burns, the first 2 books in the series, I had a hard time getting invested into the story and the characters. The many monsters that have to be slain seem over the top to me, and I somehow didn't really believe in this world and the kind of magic in it. However, we are slowly coming to the authors whose prose I can truly appreciate. I clearly recognize the writing skill of this duo. There is nothing wrong with the prose, although from the beginning the fast-paced dialogue and muscled witticism didn't really grab me by the throat. I have good hopes that I will like the following books better. Both books scored 3.5 stars, so enjoyable, but as of yet not very memorable. In another buddy read with BJ, we tried our hand at Tad Williams, another author who receives much praise on Booktube, especially for his Memory, Sorrow and Thorn trilogy. 3 huge books that start off with the Dragonbone chair. I'm afraid I haven't yet been turned into a Tad Williams fan. Of the almost 800 pages of the Dragonbone chair, at least 500 could just as well have been called the Dragonbone chore. So slow and so tedious. The book took me more than 3 weeks in April and May. I made a separate video on this read. The story is captivating, but most of the time it hardly progresses in any direction, which made me lose interest in the book. Again, the prose is very good, and I still want to read the second and huge 3rd book in the series, but I am in no hurry to do so. I gave this book 72 points out of 100, so it's not a bad book. Yet, I can only hope that the other ones will be significantly better. At least my anticipation for the rest of this series has plummeted below 0. In May and June, I read the first 2 books in what I believe is called the Land of Ingery trilogy by Diana Wynne Jones, House Moving Castle, which scored 74 points, and Castle in the Air, which I gave 71 points out of 100. These were nice reads, although I had expected something better, to be honest. To me, the storytelling is a bit foggy at times, which makes me lose my way in the books, and also the stories themselves were not very memorable. I still have 1 book to go in this trilogy, House of Many Ways, which I will probably get out of the way in 2026. But just my choice of words here, getting the book out of the way, says it all really. Happy to have met this author, but I'm quite sure we will part ways after I've read House of Many Ways. Unless, of course, that book really surprises me. Stranger things have happened. Now we're finally entering territory where I truly appreciated meeting the author. Although this next one would have been much higher on this list had he met my high expectations. I'm talking about Joe Abercrombie. Like some other authors I've read for the first time this last year, Abercrombie is praised all over Booktube. His First Law trilogy, which I read mostly in February, ranks in many top 3s. With 1 3.5 stars and 2 4-star ratings, I can honestly say I enjoyed the books. Abercrombie's character writing is one of the best, and his humour is catching. He is no doubt a gifted writer. It's just that I dearly missed any overarching story or plot. Things progress as they progress, but it seems as if all the characters move without any true goal. In this way I've discovered that I'm a story-first reader. Even though many of the other elements that make a good book are important to me, if the story is mediocre or boring even, no amount of superb prose can save the book. And that's what I experienced in all 3 books of the First Law. Abercrombie's writing is good enough for me to give the author another try in the future. But that won't be happening in the near future, because I have so many more new authors to discover and read other works by authors that I appreciate more. The next author on the list, the ninth, scored reasonably well when I read his books. But now he already has somehow been snowed under by others in my memory. I'm talking about R.A. Salvatore, one of the most prolific writers out there. I read the first 3 books in The Legend of Drizzt in about 2 weeks in May and June. Homeland, Exile and Sojourn were fun and easy reads. Even though I really enjoyed the books, they are also forgettable in a way. I do remember the story, but I hardly ever think back on the books. My appreciation for books can change over time. Authors like Guy Gavriel Kay or Michael J. Sullivan only seem to improve in my memory, while others like R.A. Salvatore more or less go under in the massive range of writers of fantasy. Still, if I can get my hands on the mass paperback edition of the other trilogies in this series, I will most certainly buy them and read them. Just a couple of months ago, I read 2 books by the other Brandon Mull. Fablehaven and the second book, Rise of the Evening Star, were really great YA stories. I liked the first one a bit better, 86 points out of 100, than the second, 82 points. But I'm eager to continue with the series. I have only book number 3 here in my Liberty library. At this point, this seems to be one of those authors I might visit so every now and then, when I'm in the mood for a nice magical adventure on children's level. I will at least finish his Fablehaven series and will most likely give one of the other series a try. Since the beginning of my journey into fantasy, I have been interested in pre-Tolkien books. What did the genre look like before Mr. Tolkien firmly changed the laws? In the quick overview of my new authors in the first 2 years of this journey, you could see a couple of them passing by, like George MacDonald and Lord Dunsany. They held low spots on the list. Hope Merlees, the only pre-Tolkien author I read last year, fares better in that regard. I gave her beautiful book, Blood in the Mist, which I read in July, 88 points out of 100, a solid 4.5 stars. From her enchanting prose, one can tell that she was a poet. It was published in 1928. She published only 2 other works of fiction, some non-fiction and, as mentioned, poetry. Despite my love for this one, I won't go into her 2 other books. At this point, she remains my favorite pre-Tolkien fantasy writer. One of my favorite new authors of 2025 is James Islington. Even though he holds 4th place right now, I have a feeling he will move up in the ranks when I read more of his works. In June and July I read the first 2 books in his Lycanius trilogy and was in awe of his storytelling. To my own disappointment, I had to take a break from the series. These books are intricately plotted and require a high level of concentration, more than the Drizzt books or the Fablehaven books, for instance. During the summer months, my mind was mainly occupied by my planned move from my home into this RV, in which I now have been living full-time for about 2 months. Somewhere in the beginning of next year, I will definitely read the 3rd book, The Light of All That Falls. I'm hoping for a great finale of all that this writer has set up in the first 2 books. And then it's on to his Hierarchy trilogy, of which recently the 2nd book, The Strength of the Few, was released. This is most certainly one of those authors I will probably follow for the years to come. An author I won't be following anymore, despite the fact that she holds the 3rd place on this list, is Jacqueline Harpman. The reasons why I will only read one of her books is that she has passed away in 2012 and she has only published 3 books altogether. The other two are literary fiction and don't really sparkle my imagination. But I, Who Have Never Known Men is simply a masterpiece and could be ranked among fantasy with a little bit of imagination. The book is only 188 pages, but those are of the highest quality. The story is fascinating, and the way Harpman keeps the reader on the edge of his seat is amazing. With 92 points out of 100, this short novel is close to a 5-star read. This next author is also wriggling his way into my pantheon of favorite writers. I now have read 4 books by Neal Shusterman and am convinced of his mastery as a writer and teller of stories. In January, it took me only 2 weeks to read all 1,600 plus pages of his Arc of a Scythe trilogy, which is saying something. Normally I do not read that fast. But this series kept getting better with every book. With an average rating of more than 92 points out of 100, this series has been on my mind since reading it. That's what's so unique about Shusterman's stories. They make the reader think deep about certain things. In this case, if it is truly desirable to live forever and not have any struggles in life anymore, like disease or shortage of money or work. For one thing, in this story, all art has all but disappeared from human society. The other book I read in September is All Better Now, his latest novel. This one also gives the reader lots of material to think about when a new pandemic hits the world. Not Corona this time, but Crown Royale. Survivors, which is practically everyone, seem to be utterly content with life. This has extreme consequences for humanity. Next to Shusterman's vivid imagination, he also writes excellent prose, and his characters develop in a natural and credible way. I have all 5 books of the Unwind dystology on my shelves, but I wouldn't be surprised if more of his books will end up in my possession. My favourite new author of this last year, without a doubt, is Patrick Rothfuss. I read the 2 books in the Kingkiller Chronicles and one of his novellas in March and April and was blown away by the sheer beauty of this writer's prose. Even in the slow regard of Silent Things, which I did not like at all, the prose is superb. Next to that, the story in The Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fear is so engaging that I inevitably entered the vast army of people who cannot wait for the final book, The Doors of Stone, to come out. I belong to the part of this army who actually believes the book will be published one day, as long as his fandom can leave the man in peace, so that he can, as close as possible, recreate that feeling of freedom he had from before he was an acclaimed author. I gave The Wise Man's Fear 99 points out of 100, and the first book was my second this year to receive the maximum score of 100 points. The other being A Song for Arbonne by Guy Gavriel Kay. I made 4 videos already on the 2 major books by Rothfuss, and still I have the feeling I have not adequately conveyed my admiration for this man's writing. To me, it is perfect, as far as anything can be that, of course. Unless the final book comes out anytime soon, I can only gush about my love for this author in videos like this one. I will not leave any opportunity unused to sing his praise. I suppose that adding more than 30 new authors in 3 years of reading fantasy is not bad at all. Still, there are so many I haven't yet gotten around to, which of course hold so much promise. From many of them I have already bought their works, like from Stephen Erickson, George R.R. Martin, John Gwynne, Kristen Britton, Juliette Marillier, Dan Simmons, M.L. Wong, Fonda Lee, Ken Liu, Brian Jake, Sebastien de Castell, and others. Then there are, of course, the many writers whose works I have not even gotten around to buying, but who are very high on my wish list, like Lois McMaster Bujold, C.S. Friedman, V.E. Schwab, Emily Arends, Philip C. Quantrell, Jed Hearn, Andrew Watson, Philip Chase, Trudy Caravan, Naomi Novik, David Farland, Christopher Rocchio, and Ryan Cahill, just to name a few. There are many more authors on my radar. That list goes on and even keeps on growing. I wonder which of those I will have met for the first time at the end of next year. Until then, thank you very much for watching this video. Until we meet again at Dutch Greybeard.